audio is much clearer.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, awesome. I think we're off. You'd laugh if you knew what I had to do. Anyway, yeah, so the stream should be on and it's server side.
Okay.
Okay. Where do we start?
Yeah. So, like, how to figure out the value of the things that you're doing. I think it's a complicated question.
Yep. On the opposite side of simplicity comes trust and sort of the balance between how much it costs to actually ascertain the value ahead of time versus how much it costs to just give it a go and see.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Well, and then the other thing is attribution. Like, attribution by itself is not like is just how the costs, like, is how the profits get split, right? It's not. It doesn't have anything to do with money until you go and try and sell it.
No, even later, it's got nothing to do with money until somebody buys,
Right.
and then when they buy, the algorithm that we have yet to develop will split it based on the current configuration of the day. So at that time, like, we know that that algorithm cannot be made to be final or fixed. It's going to be upgraded, updated, and modified. And moreover, part of the ambient attribution concept is that any buyer can override any attribution at any point in the tree. So just because the algorithm says that someone who blindly followed the algorithm would pay you X% of their payment, that particular buyer has the power to say no. I disagree with how that's working. That's a valuable signal to send us, but it's still a feature that we got to leave in there. So it's basically over time. 50 years from now, the attribution getting paid for a particular piece might look very different to what it was at the time of launch.
Right. So I like that. I like that idea that, like, so when you say buyer, I just want to make sure I'm on the same picture as you here. The buyer is the person who's actually getting the value from the software. The person who has the problem that needs to be solved that the software is solving.
Correct.
Okay. So, like,
and we're basically saying, sorry?
They're the person who's, like, paying to execute, like, a particular solution.
Yeah.
Okay. And I interrupted you. You were saying.
No, I had finished.
Okay.
It was just simply saying that, yeah, it's a tricky problem, but there are things on our side of being able to solve that problem.
Okay. So what I'm suggesting when I'm, like, trying to supply my work or my capital or anything like that is just, it's more a split than it is like an actual value, right?
I don't understand. Are you asking me about how would attribution be handled versus the money that got paid to you?
I think I have a pretty clear picture in my head of, like, how the money, like, payment actually works, right? Is you have an attribution table, which is like an equity table. And, like, and then everything just splits according to that equity table, plus whatever sort of override I want to apply as a buyer. That table is populated by a combination of all the contributors, all the financiers, and all the people actually executing the software.
Correct. So it's a highly dynamic table.
Yeah. I actually really agree with you too that the person buying should have the right to override any of it. I think there's probably like not the total right to override it though. Like, yeah,
there's some work we got to do in terms of, like, the it should be like a weighting of some kind that can steer it around. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but I know that at least sending the signal that the buyer thinks that the attribution table should be different to what was calculated is important.
Right. So what I get to when I think about, like, what do I want to consider the value of, like a contribution or like a bit of capital to be is like, do I care about the actual long-term like accrued value in the piece of software that I'm writing in terms of actually how much money was acquired by it? Like, like when you're investing, you think about return on investment, which like in this model, like
Right.
the type of money that you're getting back feels almost more like a dividend than like a payout
Yeah.
of profits on a payout of excess like money that's acquired by the company
Yeah.
in the course of its operation, basically, right?
Yeah, and that used to be the way that companies operated.
Yeah.
You used to buy stock because it gave you dividends. Somewhere along the lines, that doesn't happen anymore. It seems insane to me. Whatever. And now it's all kind of working on greater fool theory type of models.
Right. I understand somewhat what happened there is that like the investor crowd thought at some point that it's more valuable to the company to leave money invested in the company and realize like the gains via an increase in the value of the equity.
Yeah, but I mean, like the what we're trying to remove is the redeployment or the internal deployment of that what should be dividends.
Yeah.
Is a management decision,
Right.
whereas we're saying that's actually not any of management's business. It gets paid straight out to the contributors at the instant that the purchase occurs. Right. And then if any of those people want to reinvest, that's their choice. They can algorithmically do that. So they can set a flag where the money just bounces back in as investment to the pool. That's fine. But it's actually not, it's no one's, the money belongs to the contributor at the instant that the buyer purchased. End of story. I think that's a definite part of the algorithm.
Right. So if you look at the information that's available to the parties when they're making the decision about the value of their contribution, like, first of all, when I'm suggesting like what value that I'm providing, I'm not actually suggesting in raw dollar value or raw like whatever currency you're using, right? I'm suggesting I'm suggesting an equity split on this particular project, basically, right?
That's probably a mistake, because that's not. Whilst we don't have this algorithm, we know quite a bit about it, and we know a lot about what it isn't. Right. One of the things that isn't is a split. It is absolutely not a split. So the packets at the moment are contributions to those packets currently are made up by code and money. Now there's other types of contributions like the salesmanship, the project management, the different kinds of things like that. Let's ignore that from the model for now, because they're just applying the same rules a bit differently. The fundamental problem is what is the balance between money and labor,
right?
And that's been a problem for hundreds of years. It's not like it's a new issue, but the way that we're solving it is that we never do a split. We simply record what was done. Right. So a packet has code from all these different commits. This particular committer took money from this person in order to build on this packet, and they produce these commits. So we can connect how the money paid from a funder was converted by a laborer into code commits. Yeah. And then we can know whether those commits are worth something. The actual
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm real sorry, man. I ran out of data. There's no real way to just. I can't even explain that one away. I just fucked up. Fluff. Sorry.
Oh, it's all good.
Fluffed up. Okay, so only ever recorded what was contributed against it. The split is done at the instantaneous moment of purchase, where the buyer pays over, depending on an algorithm. The very least dynamic. And
there's pretty bad latency right now.
What's that, sorry?
Oh, there's some pretty big pops and slowdowns. I get the gist of what you're trying to say.
Oh, okay, hang on. If you just, yeah, I'm really sorry. If you give me like just 5 more minutes, I'll be back to my proper internet.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, maybe it's best to just wait for that.
So, I mean, I don't know if you're hearing me coming through clear.
I'm hearing you perfectly fine.
Okay. I do think that like when you're selling something that you don't know the actual value of, like you have to be able to make a suggestion of the value of it, right?
Yeah.
Like there needs to be. I get like the buyer is the person who's providing the final say on what the price actually is, right?
Say that again, sir.
I guess I mean like the buyer is the person who's deciding like where the funds should actually get routed, basically, right?
Yes, ultimately. Yep.
And they're doing it probably through some sort of voting mechanism, right? Like not voting as in like they're pitching their vote and waiting until everything settles, but kind of like they're working in tandem with all the other people providing information about what their beliefs are when they are buying in order to come up with some sort of aggregate sense of value.
Right. Yep, something like that. It's basically an interface that lets us lets people signal what they want.
Right.
And then sort of part of what the algorithm does is it takes it just can provide different ways to weight different sets of depending on any number of things. That's part of the continuous arbitrary voting concept, where you can vote on every time you buy something, you can vote on anything, anytime. And then it's up to the person who's in control of dispersals to follow or interpret those data sets any way they see fit.
Do you want to reconvene in a few minutes?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure.
I'll be right back. Are you able to stay in the room, because that'll keep the stream up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, sweet. I'll be right back. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, I'm back. I'm very sorry about that. Thank you for your patience. Things.
No worries. Just let me know if you need to go again.
No, should be good. Should be good.
Okay. So
can I unroll a few loops and ask you what in your words is the problem that we are trying to solve here?
right, like making a contract,
Right.
like to perform some services here. Like
Right.
I've kind of encountered the idea that it's a little bit difficult to figure out like how I would value the work that I'm doing, like how much of it do I want to be attributed for, and how much of it do I want to sell.
Okay, I got you. That's completely taken care of. And if I may explain what our policy is for that.
Yeah.
The other side of the deal has already agreed to what I'm about to explain. So the answer is you can't know. You can never know ahead of time what something's worth until someone's paid for it. And you can't know ahead of time what the split between the money you were paid and the value that you created is. It's just it might not actually be knowable at this instant in time ahead of time. That's too big a subject that I want to go into, but it might actually be one of those unknowable things. Anyway, the point, the way that we deal with that is that when it comes to funders are people who put up money to buy something when they don't know what the value of that thing is going to be in the future. And doers are people who work on a thing when they don't know what the value of that thing is going to be. Now, we've hit ourselves with a particularly thorny example of a packet that is hard to value because it's vaguely defined. There's not many packets like it. The value could be, what's a blockchain worth? Who knows? So it's got some of the harder parts of solving that problem. Whereas a packet for, say, a CRM that's been in production, that's been sold many times, you sort of get a better sense of what it's worth, and any kind of speculative work you might be doing on it has a lot less risk involved than something that's almost pure venture like what we're trying to do right now. So the way to keep everybody happy, I think, is to leave the equation as undefined. It's a promise. It hasn't settled yet. It's that you know that to provide this work, you need X funds per month on a regular basis, because that's just how expenses are. Expenses are regular and stable. Your output is not regular and stable. It's bursty, and I don't want um, I want X number of packet increments per week. Like it's not the time, it's the value being put in. What is that value? I think that a separate question to ask is, at the end of each month, treating the situation arbitrarily. So this is not singling you out or anyone in particular. Just the general problem is, did this person perform for the money that they were given in this particular month, and how to assess that. If we're going to say that hours is not something that's being hard tracked, because as we know, that's kind of pointless. It's even more pointless in really thorny problems like what we have in front of us. I mean, when is it a bad deal? I think it's a bad deal when you can say that the value provided is less than the money paid, right? So if there's some sort of a agreement as to who assesses that value, at the moment it would be basically me and Scott would say this was good value, or this was more value than the money, or this was not. And like, part of that QA function is there to actually what's the word for it, like avoid, like you cannot codify everything. In fact, you probably cannot codify most things, if we're being honest. And so a QA function that's an intelligent person, so long as they're arm's length from the buyer, from the funder and the doer, at arm's length, you'd be able to say, yeah, this was valuable, more than what the money was, or this was less value than what the money was, as an instinctive assessment, like how you get a valuation on your house. They don't really know because it's only worth what someone's going to pay for it, but they sort of have a rough idea, and they couldn't tell you their exact process. It's not a machine, otherwise, a machine would do it. It's kind of an educated guess.
I mean, it's a market, right?
Yeah, it's a market, and the QA's reputation depends on them being accurate and being proven to have been accurate over time. So, assessing that this packet was of value more than what was paid for it, over time, the QA's assessments can be summarized, and you can say that that's good QA, that's a bad QA. This is a good valuator, a bad valuator. You can have multiple people assess the value of the packet. It's kind of up to the funder who they want to believe, because it's all just tea leaves and entrails before a buyer comes along and buys it. Right now, in our specific case, the person who's going to know that they're getting value or not is me. And I'm like, yes, I'm getting value. No, I'm not getting value. Was the value worth more than the monthly payment? Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of as much as it needs to be. Like it can be as light or as heavy as what the parties want to make it.
Yeah.
And the piece that I've consistently stressed is that the packet does not have ownership division. The packet has contribution records.
Right.
And the splitting is done by an algorithm that we have not made yet.
Yeah.
And that's why some of the value provided needs to be expended on developing that algorithm, even into a crude version.
Yep.
Some of the properties of that algorithm are that it is never final. So a crude version is perfectly fine to operate with. No one's even paying for it. So it's even more fine to use a crude version because there's no money flowing, right? It's sort of it's an iterative thing that we can build on over time. The point is that two people, one who's putting in money and one who's putting in labor, can never, by definition, fairly split how the money's going to go, because they are both, it's like oil and water, right? Like they are different fundamental creatures. And the only way that you're going to approach fairness is by someone at arm's length who's disinterested in the actual transaction, applying some sort of rule that they apply across many different parties for many different circumstances, and applying that rule to that particular packet and splitting it on the day. And I think that's as close as you can get to fair.
Yeah. Yeah. What I wanted to talk about a little bit is just the different sense of value that the different parties have. I don't know if it matters. I don't know if it matters, first of all. Okay. Let me qualify it heavily, right? What you're saying is that the arbitrator, the QA person, is basically the one that has not a final decision, but enough of a decision that their purpose in the system is to basically destroy this ambiguity in this question, right?
Yeah, to settle the ambiguity, and generally speaking, only in the case of a dispute. So if everyone's happy, then there's kind of no need to call on QA to settle anything, because there's no problem.
Right. But I think you're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater a little bit by saying that the value sense that the different parties bring is just ambiguity that needs to be settled by a mutually disinterested third party.
I think it's very constructive for both parties to be signaling what they think the value they provided is.
Right.
I think that's extremely valuable.
Yeah.
And it helps both parties to know, because you might think you're supplying tens of thousands of dollars a day worth of value. The other side might be like, I think it's like $100, you know, like, or zero if they think they can't sell it for anything. Like, it's really helpful to the business relationship to know what everyone's thinking about the value. Having an independent third party assess the value periodically, useful service. It's going to cost some money because that takes time, but still useful.
I actually kind of think that, like, when there's a dispute in the sense of value between parties, it's more interesting. It's more interesting information than when there's an agreement.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Like, you know, my experience of funders is that, like, what they're most interested in is knowing that they're going to get more back than they put in, and like beyond that, like, what multiple more back are they interested in getting, right?
That's really what they care about. They're multiple. Yeah.
My sense of, like, doers, programmers, like laborers, is that they're more interested in, like, the value sense they're most interested in is, like, does the work that they're contributing right now make other work later easier?
Yep.
When are those two things not aligned? Like, that's the thing I've been kind of spinning my wheels about for the last day. It's just like,
they're basically constantly not aligned.
Right. Like, the function of the QA here is a very complicated one, actually, because you have to say, like,
well, yeah, but it's because it's a person.
Mm-hmm.
A person does a complicated thing very well,
right?
And the good QAs will rise to the top and will get more jobs with higher value than the bad ones.
So how does their contribution factor into the ultimate result? Like, they just get attribution too for being a QA.
Yeah.
And their attribution is, like, to me,
it's
that's
the same.
Like,
it's
they would suggest their value, basically, right?
Well, they'd offer their value at the start because they're like, well, we'll sort of, this is if there was a money exchange going on, QA would say that we will do the QA on these packets for X% of the money. So they can ask for some fixed funds for being part of their service, and the attribution that's due to them would be calculated by the algorithm that we have yet to make.
Okay.
So they would get some attribution as well. Don't know what it is. It's bound to be something. And they could ask for an amount of cash, whereby they will not trigger their service until you pay that cash. So at the start, we're going to be free QA, where we're like, well, we're just glad for people to put money through the system. But as that load increases, we'll start saying, look, you got to actually pay, and we're not dealing with packets that are worth, say, less than 5K each, because it's just not worth the time. And then you can allow smaller QAs to pop up and all that. And ultimately, so long as QA is always treated like an interface, hopefully for some cases, we can start using some of those language models to just train something that does a good enough job most of the time.
So then let me ask you, because I think you've actually put it in terms that make the problem that I had in my head fairly concrete.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Do you believe that the incentives are like adequately balanced between, like, labor and capital for the QA in that system? Like, if the QA
absolutely,
if the QA is being paid from the capital pool, then, like, do they fundamentally have as much interest in, like, making sure that the labor is good?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because QA, unlike labor and unlike funding, QA has a heavy reliance on reputation. So you can be a bad QA a couple of times, but the good QAs are ones that have proven to be accurate and fair and fast and responsive in how they've dealt with balancing those things.
They're almost kind of like an interpreter. Like,
an interpreter.
Languages, right?
Yeah. And someone who's disinterested as well. It's like their interest is maintaining their reputation so that their ability to charge stays intact. That is distinct and arm's length and disinterested in each individual party for their individual case. Now, I'm just about to lose reception for about 1 minute as we go through a tunnel.
All right.
I'll be right back. Hopefully that helps a bit, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Funny thing, in Europe, you can maintain reception right through really long tunnels.
Do they put like Wi-Fi antennas or like cell
Yeah.
boosters in the middle of them?
They must. Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, looks like we survived that tunnel. Maybe technology has improved a little bit.
5G, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we're good.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm on board with it so far. You know, I don't see any like holes that need to be poked. Like when I started thinking about it as in terms of like, obviously if you have the idea and you have the money and you have the like talent, you can just like you get all the attribution, right?
Well, that's not really. If Are you saying if as one person you have all those things, not like you went out and hired some people and worked with some people and all that, or what?
Yeah, that's right. Like if I know how to
if you
make
turn up and just then you get all the attribution, but you will still owe historical attribution to, just to pick an easy one, Linus, DARPA. There's a stack of people that you owe, but pretty much the equation's very simple for you if you did it all. The purpose of the Dreamcatcher is to coordinate that exact problem that we're talking about, because that chokes so much innovation, because people are afraid to get going because they think that they're being ripped off by another party, or they're afraid to say what they really want in something, and so they just vote with their feet and silently move to another project, or they plot away and they sort of like plan a coup and plan all kinds of nasty things, right? But it's just like, look, the true answer is you can't know it ahead of time. And so anything that you try and say is inherently unfair. And so in this system, we're agreeing to sign up to figure it out by a disinterested calculation, settled by a disinterested arbiter at some point when we have the information. And above all of that, the person paying the money can override anything that any of those parties say.
I suppose like you could very easily calculate the quality of a QA person by the degree to which their like assessments match the outcome when the buyer actually buys the thing.
Yeah, there's a whole range of automated tooling that I'd hope we can supply. That's basically like a dashboard that it's sort of like, how you have like those automatic poker bots that you can go play online poker and they sit on the side and calculate for you. We should have like loads of those, but for different aspects of the Dreamcatcher, it's just like contributed little programs that can run these assessments that, you pick the assessment mechanism that you like, you run it, it assists you in making your choices, it tells you where opportunity lies and where it doesn't, who to trust, who to not to trust. It's not like reputation isn't a thing that you have. It's a thing that people work out by looking at your data history.
Right.
And they work it out a way that's entirely up to them. We'll supply some defaults, some obvious defaults, but it's entirely up to individuals to make their own calculations and assessments.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, this is really reassuring. I don't know. I spent the better part of the last day just like grinding away at like how do I make a fair assessment of the value of what I'm doing before.
Right. Can I just check that what your concerns were? Was that you were concerned about what percentage of attribution you were giving away in order to receive some funds to be able to make that contribution in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, more or less. I like. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not. I just want to work on it. I don't really care if I get attribution.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. But what I'm trying to ascertain here is that if that was your concern,
yeah,
then I think that's probably the most common concern that people in general have, particularly knowledge workers, and particularly this was a problem why I believe our previous companies collapsed, was because everyone had their own version of what that split was and the value that they were providing, and it became unhinged from reality, what everyone wanted and what they thought it was going to be worth, and it caused an implosion. And so Scott and I went off and developed the Dreamcatcher system as a mechanism to tame that greed in a constructive, reliable way, because we knew that we had a pretty good blockchain system, but we knew that any company that tried to be the vendor of that system would be doomed to fail, as basically trying to fairly stuff you world to date.
I lost you for about half of that.
Yeah,
had a pretty good blockchain system, and that anybody that tried to vend that system would.
Anyone would. Hang on. Am I back now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I guess internet in New Zealand is the worst when the land is flat, wide, and there's no other cities for a long way. Anyone who tried to vend that system would fall victim to the same problems we had, which is that the corporate structures that we currently employ do not fairly balance the needs and the value attribution of the shareholders, and the customers get screwed over because everyone's trying to maintain whatever unequal splits were made. It's just it's really bad, put it that way. And so we were like, look, there's a better way to do this. We think we've got a blockchain system that can do pretty much anything that any computer can do, so the scope is practically unlimited. And so how do you make sure that everyone who goes out into the marketplace and represents our system can efficiently coordinate with everyone else who's doing it? And how do we make sure that the quality standards are immensely high? Because if you look at like everyone who's pushing Ethereum, most of them are scam artists, and you wouldn't, there's no way to trust any of them, right? We want a system that is like, if you're working with this software, that you're getting like great service, great honesty, transparency. You can swap out with anyone else anytime. There's a self-correcting mechanism in that marketplace by way of QAs and other types of tooling. It's like we just wanted an algorithmic company that could withstand the greed, it could withstand the shock loading that came from the vastness of opportunity that we see everywhere. Like, there's nowhere I've gone that hasn't just been an opportunity of some kind and has people sort of like chasing me down for, hey, where's this thing? When can we use this thing? Right? And it all turns to custard if you don't make a good, clean, automated way to handle fairly what everyone's doing, to allow them the autonomy. Yeah, I just think I broke up for a bit there. Yeah, but like the gist of it is we need this system so it can scale elastically no matter what. Tiny load, it costs nothing. Huge load, not a problem either. Anything in between at any time, instantaneous ramp up, ramp down, all of that stuff, right? no issues with like employment contracts and salaries and all that kind of thing. Like we needed an algorithmic company, and this is what we came up with.
Okay, I mean, I'm fundamentally on board. I think it's
Great.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously lots of edge cases to work out.
Totally, but that's part of our job, right? Like part of the work that we're doing. Like I targeted about 10% of the time that we spend would be trying to work out that algorithm, would be trying to work out how that system works, because the funder in this case is not going to get any money back unless we have that algorithm sorted. So it's in their best interest to ensure that their funding actually gets a payback to help us to make that algorithm.
Yeah. So just to start kind of getting some like irons on the fire about it, like everybody is constantly suggesting what their view on the value is all the time.
Yep, all the time, anytime you like.
And at the end of the day, the main thing that actually counts is real contributions.
Correct.
Okay. So
basically, that what counts is the code path that the buyer ran.
Yeah.
When for the thing that they paid money for.
Yeah.
That's what counts. Right.
And then obviously like the historical like way that path came to exist.
Yeah. Right. Which is a hard problem, but like I explained, I think that the fact that the algorithm updates over time is enough that we can actually just get going with a crude version now, and it's already going to be better for everyone than a share split deal.
Right. So what I'm wondering is if you don't, like, if I'm suggesting the value, like, am I suggesting it in a real currency or like an expectation of like real dividends, or am I doing it with some sort of like generic, like token whose value floats kind of thing?
No. You'd be basically forecasting events, right? So you'd be saying that I think X number of people will pay X dollars, if dollars is what you want to work in, for this particular code path I'm making.
Right.
And your prediction is entered into the system, and over time, whether you are correct or not is used as one way to measure the things you say in the future.
Okay. Then, like, to me, like, the only kind of like gnarly question left is basically who decides like what the actual charge is to the end user who's using the software.
Fundamentally, the end user can set that to whatever they want, right? Which could be free, but what we imagine happening is that most people pay for convenience, right? So if we set up a host that runs this class of software and it's certified, it's safe, it's secure, it's private, it's reliable, it's got support online, all that kind of thing, then people pay for us to run their particular applications.
Right.
Whenever we get paid as the block producer, we then disperse to the software contributors as well. Now, you don't have to. You can take our software and not pay anyone for it, but that's basically the gamble we're taking. We have the power to model you as a person and say, this person has been using our software and hasn't been paying. Now, we can't force them, but we can certainly leave a bad review on the internet about them. And our long-term gamble is that ethics becoming stronger and stronger in supply chains, and that our software is perfectly suited to manage and measure what ethics is and to make supply chain optimizations much more within the grasp of many companies. At some point comes the question, did you pay the software vendor fairly? And that's where we're like, well, surely we'll get paid then. At worst, right? But you got companies like Red Hat. I mean, all their stuff's open source. They're worth like $11 billion or whatever it was. I don't know, multiple billions. So you can make a lot of money just by supplying the service with an open source piece of software. We also don't have to be entirely open source. We can keep some components closed. Who sets the price? The seller sets the price. If the buyer takes it, it's a deal.
So who's the seller in this case? Is basically usually probably like
we'll be running. We'll be running a store, an app store, just as a convenience for developers who want to not have to deal with all that kind of setup and all that, and the payment processing, credit card processing from purchases, all that. So we'll basically be supplying convenience. Developers, if they want, can use that. Take this CRM, for example. I personally hand sold it to this customer. So I'm setting the price with them on something that we work out together. As the way that we're heading right now, it's going to be a percentage of every time they charge a customer, we will receive a percentage of that. Right. That percentage will be paid out to based on the attribution tables.
So they will suggest the price.
Yep, we can signal that we think that's unfair, but at the end of the day, it's what they say it is. And if they choose to shortchange us, then we'll stop paying attention to their app. Other people somewhere else in the world might think that that's still a good deal, so they'll continue to improve the packets for that price. Yep. But that's basically the balance. Is either you pay nothing and no one's interested in helping you with your software, or you pay something that the market takes, and you find the right balance for what you can afford and how much service you want to get and responsiveness and all that. Generally speaking, businesses sort of, by and large, particularly small businesses, sort of do the right thing for a lot of cases. And your IT guys, I mean, you kind of want someone at the end of the phone who's going to answer you. You kind of want to know that your system's reliable and it just works and it's secure and you're using it correctly and all that stuff. Yeah. So the short answer is I don't know to your question about who sets the price. We'll figure it out. The long answer is we've got some initial clients who we can set a good price with. There's a lot of other services we can get into where the prices are set in different ways. Take, for example, a casino. A casino is a good one because the price is set by the game. It's not like like you accept it because that's how the game works and you want to win. So that's a way for us to make money and set a price when it sort of wasn't any forced amount on someone. But I think as soon as you design your program in a way that you can actually force people to pay, you're in trouble, because the temptation to abuse your users is just too great. And, maybe we'll take a beating the first few rounds, but ultimately I think because we've got this permanent record system, long term, we'll strike closer and closer to a fair payment for our services.
Yeah, I mean, when you put it that way, like when you can go and investigate every interaction that ever happened, and like apply a slightly different formula to it and replay it and see what the outcome was for everybody, it should be pretty easy to find like stable islands of happiness.
Yeah, man. I think, and we'll see what the market says. We'll see how those things play out. I don't know for sure, but I know that we should find out, because it's got to be better than what we got right now.
Yep. Okay.
So does that settle your question about how the attribution system will work under this arrangement?
Yeah. I like the fact that it's like I don't have to really I hate negotiating.
This whole system, dude. This whole system defers that, and not only defers it, but puts it out of both parties' hands. Right. It's like you just get on, do something constructive, have something to fight over. Right. Then, this other system will take care of it for you.
I really like the idea that I could say, as a suggestion, like obviously this is worth this, or like I should be getting that.
Yeah.
And I could do that as often as I want. So if I have a bad
Anytime.
day and I try and like scorched earth, I can pull back and like I can redo it the next day, and that's all just information that somebody else could look at.
Yep, information. Information.
Right. I feel way more comfortable with that than like setting a fixed number right up front, where I know that I'm missing information.
Right. Did you again, out of curiosity, did you think that our model was going to be to set a fixed number?
No, I mean, I just didn't know the exact, like, I know it's lazy somewhat, right? Like we talked a while about like
it's eventual.
The consumption is the political act here, right? The actual usage of the software.
No, it's interesting because every software dev has this problem, right? Of like, what is my time worth versus the equity versus the value versus the money I need right now. And yet there's so few, I haven't seen any systems that tackle that problem as a problem, like as a problem that can be encapsulated and solved with a piece of software. Everyone's trying to solve all these other things, but no one's trying to hit that one. That negotiation piece is it's nasty.
Yeah.
But here's an attempt at it.
You always feel like you're doing it wrong, basically, right? Like it.
You are doing it wrong. There's the only way to do it is wrong. It's
right. That like the value is just not known until the value is known, right? And when it's known, like, it like retroactively can apply. But I mean, it's still like there's still something in here that's a little bit like. I know there's a gamble from the perspective of the funder that like they will never recover the value that they put in.
Right.
Like that the value.
Right, but this.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. But I mean, in this particular case, we've tailored it so that there's a much higher chance that the funder will get what they want, because they even if they only got just the software and it just worked for them, then that's great value for them. Whereas a pure funder needs it to be of value to someone else, not them.
Right. Yeah. It all comes down to basically the quantification of risk, right? And like, no matter how much everybody talks about risk, I've never seen a formula like put forward that explains to me like how you would put a number to it. And
it's basically just YOLO. And the thing with it goes two ways, because the dev needs to say, well, I'm spending my time on this thing. It may never pay out. I could be spending my time on this other thing that pays out. So the funder and the dev do share the same risk in that sense.
Yeah. And like nothing will help you quantify risk better than like very detailed records, basically, right?
Right. Very detailed records, and then comparison with other people, and then a history over time. If you find a dev who consistently gets very high attribution rates, you really want that guy on your project. You really want him there, because he knows what to work on to get attribution for later. Yeah. Okay. Well, has this settled your concerns enough that we can go forwards with that document as it stands?
Yeah, I'll just take another read at it. I'll get back to you.
Make any and then just make any modifications that you think are needed. But I think that's a great way to deal with this whole class of problem for the whole industry.
Right. Just ignore it.
Yeah, pretty much, man. Like when people invented promises, and it's like, here's an object that represents a thing that's not here yet, and you're like I still remember the first day I was like, oh, you thingified the future, and now I can do stuff to it. Like, it's awesome.
All right, man. Well, thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, man. No worries. So I'll wait for you to approve those suggestions on the doc or not, and then tell me if it's okay to send over to the funder.
Yep.
They are totally okay with this concept. That document will cement the understanding between all of us to make sure it's written down and well understood. My concerns are to make sure that they understand that the hours thing is a guide, and that it's actually the value that we are getting from you, not
Yeah.
the hours that you sit in front of a computer and punch a card on.
Yeah, oof, never again. I hate it. I like.
Yeah.
It's it's mind shredding to sit there, and it's bullshit work, right? I don't know if you ever read that book.
Yeah, I guess. Well,
yeah.
Great. Thanks for talking, and I'll look forward to hearing from you soon.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, man.
Okay, peace.
Bye.
See you later.